John Deere E140 today. Gonna take a look at it. Customer brought it in and says that it won't do anything when you turn the key. The lights won't come on, won't click, no noise of anything whatsoever. We're gonna go through the diagnosis and repair on this and show you what the issue is. Hit that like and subscribe button as we go along if you enjoy the content. Get the hood off here for easy access. With this model, when you turn the ignition on to the headlight area, the headlight should work as long as the battery is good and the fuse is good. Well, the first thing I did was tested the battery. Right now I get 0.217, 0.220, basically 0 voltage. I had this on a maintainer this morning on a 10 amp charge for about an hour. That was maybe an hour ago or so. It's already lost every single bit of its voltage. It's not holding anything at all. The battery is bad. That's the first thing that you want to check, is the connections at the battery and where this negative wire here comes down and attaches to the frame. If that's all tight and the battery's good, you'll next go on to the fuse. We're going to replace the battery real quick and we'll proceed on from there. If you still have some voltage in your battery, you want to make sure to take the negative off first. Although this one has basically 0, we'll still do it that way. Many times I'll go ahead and replace the bolts on these also, but these are corrosion free and in pretty much perfect shape, so I'm going to reuse those. Negative wire out of the way. Now this battery actually says 3 of 23. Not too old at all. And it is a 350 cold cranking amp battery. Not sure if it got left dead and maybe they live out on a farm or something like that. From the looks of this mower overall, that could very well be the case. If you're tightening this back down, you want to tighten the positive first. If I don't put a maintainer on my batteries with my riding mower, it doesn't get more than a year out of it either. Just because of where we're at, we get a lot of wind. It's kind of out on the edge of town. I'll leave that off for now, just so we can test it and see what the actual voltage is. Not that we're gonna have any questions as far as whether it's good or not. Well, I've still got the ignition to the light, but as soon as I hooked up the negative, since it was already on, I get clicking out of the solenoid. Again, you want to make sure these are completely tight. And then also that the ground is tight down at the bottom. It is. Let's see what we get as far as voltage goes now. Looks like we've got 12.5 volts on this new battery. Plenty good enough to get everything started. Let's also test to our negative here and test our fuse. See if we're getting voltage to each side of the fuse. See if it's good. Got 12.48 there and 12.48 there. Fuse is good. Battery is good. Go ahead and turn the key now. I'll set the parking brake. You do not have to be sitting on this to try to start it. Now when I hit the key, you can hear some clicking coming out of the solenoid here. What that is telling you is that likely the safety switches and everything are good. We're likely getting 12 volts to the solenoid, but the solenoid is not engaging. You don't want to keep just holding that on to start. Obviously something's not working right. Either the solenoid's bad, the starter's bad, or we have a bad ground wire somewhere. Let's first just test and make sure that we're getting good voltage to the solenoid, because this is going to tell you for sure that all of the safety switches are good if we're getting good voltage to the solenoid. If we're not, it's going to tell you that one of the safety switches is bad or has a bad connection, or that the connection at the ground's bad. When I'm turning the key, 12.34 wherever, almost battery voltage, that's going to be plenty good to get this unit started. That's telling us that either the solenoid is bad now, or possibly the starter's bad. If these connections are not real good, there's a bad connection or it's not a tight connection, that can cause that. They'll basically just not have a good enough connection in order to start it. Next, we're going to test and see if it's the solenoid or if it's the starter. Very easy to do this, because what we can do is we can just jump these two top posts and see if the starter tries to engage. If the starter tries to engage at that point, then we know that it's the solenoid that's the problem. It's getting good voltage to the solenoid, but the solenoid is not putting power through from the positive here to the positive to the battery cable. Just jump that across. You want to make sure not to touch anything. All I get is nothing. Starter does not even try to engage. That means the starter's bad. Very easy. We can replace the starter. We'll be good to go on this one. Now, if you do that and your starter tries to engage, obviously we know the solenoid's bad. It's getting that good voltage. It's just not connecting that power. If our fuse or anything like that's bad, sometimes what I'll get is I'll get a good connection at the top and it'll show good voltage. But if you actually come down to the bottom connection, up underneath, there'll be a bad connection at the actual fuse block. So you can also test from the negative back to either one of these to see and make sure that you're getting good voltage actually at the positive wire where it's feeding, where these two wires are feeding the entire mower. As long as you're getting good voltage there, you know that everything as far as the safety switches and stuff should be powered well. Many times it's just this connection at the fuse. That's a big one that's many times overlooked when people try to do diagnostics, along with the negative where it attaches to the frame over there. We're going to replace this starter and get this taken care of. There are many different things that can be wrong with the safety switches. If you need a video on safety switches, see our other video. I'll put a link to that down below. It kind of just goes over all the different safety switches, their functions. That's not a very good air cleaner for sure. There's 2 1/4-inch screws that sit down in here that hold the housing to the air inlet. They're just little plastic screws. And when I say 1/4-inch screws, I don't mean that they're actually 1/4-inch screws. I mean that the head's 1/4-inch. Got 5/16 head plastic screws that go down in. It's to the flywheel fan. Looks like we got a bunch of something up in here also. It's never a good sign. It means that we very likely have at one time or another, whether it's now or not, have a mouse up in the housing. Got some 3/8 head bolts all the way around. 3 on either side. As I go to take off these 2 5/16, I noticed that this probably isn't going to do a whole lot as far as the pulse line goes for the fuel pump. Without that in there, you're not going to pump any fuel. We'll get this starter issue taken care of first, and then we'll have to address that. 5/16. Again, just plastic screws. Screwing into plastic. 1/4-inch or 5/16 head on these. And that just pulls away, and now this whole thing will pull up and off. straight up and off. I don't see a mouse or anything under there, so that's a good sign. We'll want to take our 7/16 nut off this 1/4 bolt of the starter. I like to hold the positive cable as I'm trying to do this to make sure that that back nut doesn't turn. It looks like in this case, yeah, in this case it's going to try to turn anyway. I'm going to grab my skinny pliers, get them in on the back side so that doesn't turn. Otherwise it'll just keep turning and turning. Yes, you'll ruin the starter, which we don't really care about, but it's going to be just harder to get off. That's why I got on the back side. One off. Now we'll need a T40, Torx head 40, to get in here and get these taken off. Now you can try to use that. I think it's a 1/2 inch maybe, but it's really hard to get in on this right side. There's not a whole lot of room, even if you turn it to the flat side. Yeah, this starter doesn't want to turn at all. It's completely locked up on the inside. Normally what I'll do is I'll put that in there and I'll use just a 1/4 inch wrench at the back side, and I'm just going to break it loose. Because a lot of times if you try to use your little impact, it's not going to pull that initial torque to get that off of there. As soon as it's loose, an impact will take it off just fine. Drop it down. Many times there'll be a little wire keeper on a lot of these, depending on the routing of the wires. This one, it goes over to the right hand side so everything sits below it, but you want to make sure when you put this back together you don't pinch these wires behind the starter. We'll use these same bolts again. This is going to be a 592, 599 starter. It's an OEM Briggs & Stratton starter. Do you have to use an OEM Briggs? No, absolutely not. On this one we're definitely going to. We normally will give the customer the option of what they want to use. So it really just depends. A lot of the starters anymore have came a long way, so aftermarket starters normally will do just as well. Get both of these started before we start tightening anything down. Again, it's kind of hard to get that back one started at all. It's back on there. We're going to use this same 1/4 inch, 1/4 nut on the front. Why they don't come with one is beyond me. Saves them a penny or two, I guess. Make sure that's completely tight, but again, you don't want to spin that back one, so if you hold on to this wire when you're tightening it, that'll keep you from doing that. Let's see what happens. Spins like it should. While we've got it all open, we'll blow it out real good. There's no signs of mouse damage or anything in there. We'll line these notches up here, right with the air cleaner intake, right here, one on each side, as it goes straight down. Perfect. Then you got your 6 bolts back in. Sometimes the 2 in the back are actually a little bit shorter. So you want to pay attention. If there are 2 shorter ones, they'll go to these 2 on the back side. In this case, there are not. They're all the same size. like to get everything started before I start tightening any of these down. Start tightening them down early, something will not go right at some point, and it'll be a pain to get back together. Now the longer of the plastic screws goes down into the air cleaner, the shorter ones are what's going to go into the fuel pump. And these are 1/4 inch head here, and they're 5/16 head for the other ones. Please note a strong advise on getting this air cleaner replaced. If not, I'll probably just blow it out for them. Many times people don't want to go with what your directions are. Getting ready to put our fuel pump back on. I'm just going to cut the zip tie they had there. Looks like this thing was all cracked at one point anyway. Just kind of falling apart and broken there. Gonna put this one that I had just off a used one sitting around. I'm gonna install it down in there. I'm also gonna advise that since the piece of plastic is likely sitting down inside this valve cover, to open that. We'll see if they want to do that or not. Will it cause any damage? Probably not if I had to guess, but you never really know for sure unless you open it up. I want to go down in there real well. Almost not long enough, just makes it. See what happens, see if this thing will fire up and run again. Getting fuel in the filter. See what kind of fuel we're getting out. Looks clear, it doesn't look horrible. Looks like we're getting a good flow. Just barely dribbling, and that looks to be water, not fuel. That is about as cloudy as it can possibly get. Use this 12-volt pump and see if we can't get down to some good gas. Very, very cloudy all the way. Again, looks like more water than it does gas. You can see there's just a tiny layer of gas right on top. Wow. I think someone may have used the wrong container here. This is all going to need drained out, no doubt. Draining this into a just a clear container so you can kind of see. But I think we may be past the majority of the water, even though the rest of it doesn't look great. Still real cloudy. I'm going to drain the carburetor out also. Just go ahead and take the fuel solenoid off the bottom. It's kind of hard to do on these. Goes. Now that it's done draining, took our fuel line off. I cranked it over a little bit to get everything that was out of the fuel pump out of there. And we're going to replace the fuel filter. They just always seem to gather residual water in them, no matter the case. Usually you can just grab and twist and it'll come right out. Goes. As soon as you get it twisted, it usually comes right off of there. Okay. Blow that out real quick. Throw an organ fuel filter back on there. These fuel lines are in bad shape or anything, or you notice any cracking on the inside, along that inside wall, if there's any cracking around in there, you'll want to replace the fuel line also while you're there. Didn't see any of that here, so I'm not going to worry about it. I want to make sure the whole back and everything's flushed out before we get this any further. I'm not sure why that goes around like that. It's in pretty bad shape, the EPA line, but take our gas extractor down in there and get everything out we can. See in there, I can't really see much, if any. I like to use some gum out carb cleaner. It'll kind of dry everything out as it evaporates. New fresh gas, and it's got Phaser 3000 in it, so that'll kind of absorb any other moisture that wasn't out of there. It's almost impossible to get it all without completely dropping the tank anyway. You can do that if you got some nasty stuff in there. Normally it doesn't need to happen as long as you treat it. See how this thing does. Goes to show you when you start a repair, you never really know where it's going to go. Keep in communication with the customer, let them know as you go along, hey, I found this next. You know, without us replacing that starter, we're not going to know anything about that fuel system unless you completely drain it. The top looked pretty good like this, and then the bottom just full of water. Something you're not going to know, and a lot of times until you get further into something, all you can do is give an estimate. So that's what we do, and we keep the customer informed as we go along. Hopefully this helps somebody out get their starter replaced, their ignition system and electrical system diagnosed, or flush their fuel system out on their John Deere mower. Thanks for watching. Hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed the content.